Well, yeah, perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for staying back with us for Stay Tuned. My name is Jordan Maddox. I'm on the board here at the Fresno Philharmonic, and Donato has been very kind to spend some time with us. And second only to listening to classical music, talking with your friends about classical music gives you an incredible amount of pleasure. So if you have any questions, I've got a handful for Donato before we're going to turn the microphones over to you. So if you have burning questions, smoldering questions, lukewarm questions, we want to hear any kind of questions that you might have. So I like to start at the beginning, which is with an encore. And we got a great encore today. Do you have any memories of interesting encores? I mean, it was an interesting choice that he made. It was a very, it was a propulsive piece, and then it was a very soft exit. So what's your experience of encores and how people choose them?
Well, hi everybody. Thanks for sticking around after the concert. For me, encores are sort of a lost art. Of course, you sort of expect a soloist to, as Sergei so beautifully did, perform an encore after a concerto, but for me the most memorable encores have been orchestral encores, which I know Sergei worked with him a lot when I was the assistant conductor of the New Jersey Symphony. Neema Järvi, a really famous Estonian conductor, was the music director, and he always did an encore at the end of the concert with orchestra. There are a whole slew of short, beautiful pieces that orchestras can play as encores. And this brings us back to my clapping comment. It is a great way of getting an audience involved, especially American audiences who aren't quite sure when to clap, why to clap, who's going to tell me when not to clap, and all these hidden agendas and rules that we've encrusted upon classical music concerts in the 20th century. And he did these encores to encourage, hey, listen, rather than get your keys ready to head out to the parking lot faster than everyone else, show your appreciation for the hard work of this orchestra and clap. And if you clap enough, I'll do an encore. And over the course of those years that he was there, he got the audience to be really engaged. So, okay, what's worse, clapping at the wrong time or showing your enthusiasm? I think I'd take the latter over the former any day of the week.
Well, this weekend, you really helped us out by filling in for Ray, who wasn't feeling well. What's your experience of filling in at the last minute for a concert? I mean, what do you go through in the preparation for that?
I've been very, very fortunate. Most aspiring American conductors do not have the experience that young aspiring European conductors get in their training, which is when you become an assistant conductor of an opera house, say in Germany, you first of all you play hours and hours and hours as a pianist for the staging rehearsals, and then you show your interest in conducting maybe after a couple of years of doing that, and the music director of the opera house will throw you in to a performance. It's usually an opera of, say, Die Fledermaus or Marriage of Figaro, something that the orchestra can practically play without a conductor. And you're thrown in with no rehearsal for like the 10th performance, number 10, on a Tuesday night. And if you do okay, the orchestra literally gives a thumbs up to the music director, and then you're given a second performance of something a little harder. And that goes on for years, for about 5 years, as you work your way up as a Kapellmeister, they're called, underneath the music director. So this is invaluable experience that does not exist in the United States, except at the large opera houses. And so my first major appointment after being the assistant conductor of the New Jersey Symphony, and is what brought me here to the Bay Area, was as the resident conductor of the San Francisco Opera. And the then music director of the San Francisco Opera, Donald Runnacles, had that training in Germany, and he decided to give me that training. So my first opera was the 5th performance of Die Fledermaus. Speaking of Die Fledermaus, I got a thumbs up. Then he gave me the 4th performance of Don Giovanni. I got got another thumbs up. And then he gave me the 6th performance of Tannhäuser, Wagner's Tannhäuser, which is a 6-hour opera. The first act alone is longer and larger in forces than any Mahler symphony. This is give you a scope. Again, no rehearsal. I got the thumbs up. And then my final performance was a magic flute. After that, Michael Tilson Thomas hired me as the resident conductor across the street at the San Francisco Symphony. And he also gave me the similar experience. Now, he had, at that time, had a shoulder issue. And he walked off the stage 3 times after conducting the first half and pulled me aside to his room and said, Donato, I can't conduct the second half. My shoulder is killing me. Put on your tails and go out there and conduct the second half. So again, no rehearsal. So I am very fortunate. Most American conductors, no matter what their training, have not had that experience. I'm very, very lucky. So for me, stepping in is also an art form. It's something that I learned, I was lucky enough to learn. So when I got the call, today's Sunday, right? It is Sunday. I got the call on Thursday night at 5 o'clock. Ray had conducted one rehearsal. She wasn't feeling well. I got the call that evening. I was driving. I live in San Francisco, and I was driving over the Bay Bridge to go to a fundraising event for my orchestra, the California Symphony, which is in Walnut Creek. And I said yes. I said I can't come right now because I can't get out of I'm literally driving to this dinner. So I went over to to Lafayette through the Caldecott Tunnel, and to Lafayette, had the dinner, drove at 8 o'clock, drove back to my apartment in San Francisco, packed my go bag, tried to remember I always forget my fancy shoes. That's the one thing I forget. So I made sure I packed my fancy shoes, and at 10 p.m. I drove, and it was great on a Thursday night at 10 p.m. driving to Fresno was 3 hours and 5 minutes. So I found myself here at 1 a.m. Friday morning, had some sleep. I wanted to drive here that night because on Friday morning I knew I could spend time at the hotel rehearsing or studying, getting ready. And then I met Sergei right here on the stage at 1 p.m. on Friday. 2 p.m. I had a meeting with Stephanie, the wonderful concertmaster. And then at 3 p.m. we had the first rehearsal for 2.5 hours. I had a dinner break, and then Friday night we had our dress rehearsal. So that was that. How that went.
Wow, thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm sure when you got here, you recognized some of the musicians on the stage. And I would love for you to share with the audience the importance of our freeway musicians and making classical music work in California today.
It is a very beautiful thing. Now, this also happens in some of the other, of course, the other large metropolitan areas, the LA area, the greater Chicago area, Boston, the Northeast Corridor, and New York City. All of the regional orchestras within a 5-hour radius of all of these areas have we're the first to call them this, but they exist in those areas as well, the Freeway Philharmonic. And these are incredibly dedicated musicians who can live anywhere within the Bay Area, to use this area as this perfect example. And so your fantastic principal bass, Andy Butler, is also my principal bass for the California Symphony of Walnut Creek. And Andy's also the principal bass of Santa Rosa Symphony. He plays in Opera San Jose. I've been down, the radius is huge, and he has many miles on his wonderful, wonderful car. But they really are the backbone of this community of regional orchestras that we, myself included, we benefit from. And they come here and they become dedicated members of this community while they're here, and they'll do fundraising events and they'll be a part of this community, and then they'll do the same thing the next week with another orchestra. So it's very special. It's part of a larger story. We can be proud of who we are as a Fresno Philharmonic, but also understand it's part of this beautiful, beautiful family of music makers.
One of the things that we celebrated today is Armenian culture and music. And I'll admit I'm a neophyte to Armenian classical music. So can you talk a little bit about some of its characteristics and maybe some highlights for people that are less familiar with this particular genre of classical music?
Well, first I have to say that I grew up in Reno, Nevada, and the founder of the Reno Chamber Orchestra was this incredible musician, Armenian musician who grew up in Tehran in the 30s and was anyway part of this incredible migration and studied for 10 years in Rome in the 50s and found himself eventually in playing in Los Angeles, and then they had casino orchestras back in the day, and he established the Reno Chamber Orchestra in 1972 and gave me, Vahe Koshayan, he gave me my first conducting opportunity when I was 19, conducting the Reno Chamber Orchestra. So I remember I never had Turkish-style coffee, ever. You know, the person growing up in Reno, but he invited me to his home, and it was like I was walking into this previous century, and it was so elegant, and he would serve me this coffee and talk about European art and poetry and music, and he opened this door to this world that I didn't really know existed, and so I'm very thankful to Vahe to showing me this world that I am now a part of. So that's that. I just wanted to mention that. But Armenia, still to this day, is incredibly dedicated to the arts. And I know this because I have many friends that play in European orchestras, for instance, the Vienna Philharmonic is a great example. And occasionally they'll go and perform in Armenia, and they are so loved and they are so appreciative of orchestral music. And there is a long history of orchestral music in Armenia, and of course the most famous person of this world is Khachaturian, who we just performed on the first half of the concert. But there are many, many composers who perform in a style that is, of course, it's heavily influenced from the Russian school of symphonic music, Tchaikovsky, Shostakovich, etc., etc. But there's also a deep connection to European music as well. So it's a beautiful blend. As you could hear in Spartacus, you had this wonderful circus music that Shostakovich is very famous for writing, and this lovely adagio that is very out of the world of Tchaikovsky and Brahms. So there's a lot of wonderful Armenian composers I encourage you to listen to.
Okay. Last question before we turn the mic over to you if you have any questions. You performed around the world, but you're located here in California. What makes performing classical music distinct in California? And it feels to me like we're in a bit of an inflection point with classical music. Where do you see it going?
That's a very good question. I think a lot about this as I'm sure Ray does as well, because we are, in a way, we're curators. Ray does such a wonderful job of showcasing music we all know, but adding a little bit of spice into the mix with something little we may not know, like the Toyama. I didn't know the Toyama, like I said, until just and it's a great piece. And it's a wonderful discovery, and I think we can all appreciate that, is that we all might have been here because of the Rachmaninoff, but we discovered something new today, the Toyama, which is a wonderful, what a concert should be. It should spark curiosity. And so I think that therein lies the kernel of attraction that classical music, if curated and thought about like Ray does so well and performed at such a level as the Fresno Philharmonic does, that if we can attract the folks to come through those doors and just sit down and be welcoming, that we as humans are by nature curious, and the generations below us are just as curious as we are. So it's a matter then of getting them here and have them feeling welcome, and the program, the words that they read in the program aren't insider baseball. In other words, the terminology, we take for granted all the things we know about classical music, but we have to assume and celebrate and welcome folks with everything they read, with everything we say to them, as if they're there for the first time and they may not know what allegro means. Or when a musician says, oh, I just played the Rock 3. Well, what's that? Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, thank you very much. Or Tchaik 5. You mean Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 5? Thank you very much. We as musicians, we talk like this all the time, this insider baseball. We cannot do that anymore. We have to really be communicators and proselytizers for our art form in a way that is inviting and not assuming. And I think therein lies the key, and that I think the Fresno Philharmonic does that so well.
All right, so I'm going to walk around with my microphone so people can ask some questions. I'm just going to come down the stairs real quick, and we have about 10 minutes to ask questions. Come right here in the front, and then I'll kind of make my way around. All right, you, sir?
Yeah, I'm curious. You came here on short notice. You conducted a piece that you had never done before. How do you prepare for that? I mean, do you get a copy of the score? Do you listen to other performances? How do you figure it out so that you know what to do?
Well, between you and me and everyone else here, actually all three pieces I'd conducted the Rachmaninoff in school and it didn't really count, and that was 25 years ago. So I'd never conducted the Cacciatore on, of course, the Toyama, and the Rachmaninoff, not really, because it had been so long ago. So part of it is what I mentioned before, is my experience as an assistant conductor being thrown into the deep end. I hadn't accessed those those feelings of nervousness for a good few years, but you know, the other thing too is experience of conducting and knowing the style. I just recently conducted Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony and his Second Piano Concerto within the last few years, so I know his style very well. And when you conduct opera, again, most young American conductors do not have this experience. When you conduct one aria from Rossini, if you can do that in performance, anything on the symphonic stage is peanuts compared to the difficulty of coordinating a Rossini aria. And so when you get good at that, knowing when to trust, when to listen, when to lead, when to watch the hands of the pianist, when to encourage the bassist to listen rather than watch, you learn these little skills. It's not about studying the music per se. It's about knowing what you need to do as a conductor and when not to do something. And that only comes through years of doing it.
Do you imagine in your mind what it's going to sound like?
Oh, absolutely.
Or the rhythm, and you've got music, a score in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it different than the rest of the orchestra?
Yes. So I wish I could show you my score. So my music has all of the music. Has the bass part, the cello part. It's all there. And I know that may sound a little complicated, but in reality, you basically have three things happening simultaneously. You have the melody instruments, so the violins and the flutes are often playing the same thing, and then you have the harmony instruments, which are often the violas and the second violins and maybe the third and fourth horns, and then you have the rhythm instruments. And you have these three. If you looked at a score, even if you couldn't read music, you could see these patterns, three different patterns happening simultaneously. And that is, so you learn how that works, how these three patterns are fitting together. And you get more and more proficient at that, as you do this. And so, yes, I can open up a score and I can hear these three things happening. I'm reading the score and I'm imagining these sounds in my brain. I couldn't do that when I was a rather decent pianist and a decent French horn player, but those are different things. And so when I decided to become a conductor when I was 19, it took me, it's a lifelong process of figuring out how to read a score, which is hearing it inside your head. Yeah, I'll repeat the question for those of you who can't hear. So the question is basically, how does one learn to become a conductor? Can you go to school for such a thing? Yes and no. So every school of a certain size, I'm sure Fresno State's a great example, you can get a master's degree in conducting. Now, usually it's not available for an undergraduate. You have to learn an instrument first. You have to become proficient as a trombone player or a pianist or a cellist as an undergrad. And then when you go to school, if you decide to pursue conducting, you can do that after and go to a variety of schools and conservatories throughout the country and get a master's degree in conducting. Now, what does that mean? It depends on the school, but usually, the bigger programs especially, once a week you'll be put in front of a student orchestra with the conducting teacher, and you go through repertoire for an hour and a half, and you learn the basics. Learning how to do waving your arms around, that is the easiest part of conducting. I never practice that. I never practice how to I call it air conducting. What I do practice is how I'm looking at the score and I'm imagining how it sounds. So in my mind, I'm creating a map, a sonic map of how I think the music should go. And so on the first rehearsal, I'm coming out with my score and my sonic map in my brain. And then when the rehearsal starts, it's a matter of my map inside is this way, and maybe I'm hearing this. So my job is to get the map of reality and the map of what I've imagined to come together. And that is different from orchestra to orchestra. Maybe I imagine the oboe solo to sound a certain way, but in rehearsal, I hear it and it's so beautiful. It might be different. It's like, well, wait a second. Let's take what I've heard from it at that moment and put it into my map that I've created. Does that make sense?
All right, we have time for about 2 more questions. Take you 2 over here. Start in the front.
A comment rather than a question. Can you hear me? Yeah. Believe it or not, the California Symphony Orchestra has been broadcast locally.
Yes.
And first rate. I mean, I can't believe that this is coming out of Walnut Creek. I mean, your programs are excellent. Performance is excellent. Bravo. And I would recommend anyone here. It's on Valley Public Radio. Is it still being broadcast?
Perhaps
in the recent past. But
yes, this happened certainly in this. I
don't know. Is it still on now?
Spring or summer? We
Anyway,
were very
that's
lucky.
my
We
comment.
decided. Thank you very much for that. I very much appreciate it. What we decided to do is we started to do a national broadcast throughout the country on the WFMT network, which this local station is a part of. And we thought it was really important to get the word out that what we're doing in California Symphony is very special. So thank you for that.
And actually, that's a good question. Brought up that question, so I was going to ask, how often does your symphony play?
About this, so the California Symphony is about the same size as the Fresno Philharmonic, many of the same musicians. We play every other month, give or take, September, November, January. And we do 2 performances just like here. So a Saturday evening, Sunday matinee.
Just thank you for coming here today. I serve on the board with Jordan, and we appreciate your spontaneity and the humor that you brought to us, because I think one of the most important things is connecting with the audience, and that made it very easy for us. So I have a couple questions. One is, did they turn the cups around your Turkish coffee to read the leaves? Did they read it? Okay, so you kind of know the reality of who you are and where you're going and what you're dealing with, right?
Yes, yes.
Next question is, what do you consider one of your most biggest challenges as a conductor or even as a musician?
Well, aside from the existential, will this art form exist 20 years from now, which
Right.
is always sort of hanging over our heads. But I think that has always been the truth of the arts. And in fact, maybe there needs to be this fragility in the arts for arts to actually flourish. I don't know. That's another large question. But aside from that, I think one of the hardest challenges, one of the biggest challenges, is what happened these last couple of days. Is that okay? I do what I do, and this orchestra does what they do, and I know a lot of people in this orchestra. But every orchestra is a different personality. It's like speed dating. I can walk out to this podium and be what I am, but it may not work. Then what?
Yeah.
And so that's because we still all have a job to do, and it's so there's the reality of the sausage making, of making music, of getting things done, even if the spark isn't necessarily there. So that's a big challenge.
Thank you. I'm a former conductor and musician. I did choirs and orchestra too, locally, but I sympathize, empathize with everything you discussed this afternoon, and I think our job is to bring people to learn to love music and to love and appreciate this kind of music that we're presenting, and the diversity that's out there, which I think Ray is doing a great job of presenting.
Absolutely.
A diversity of music, and especially reaching out to our young people, and I think that's a big challenge, is getting our young people.
It always has been.
Yeah,
It always has
it
been.
is.
Yeah.
But we're doing the best we can,
Absolutely.
and you're part of that, and thank you so much. And
Thank
Jordan, are you going to have this on your podcast?
Maybe. Well, let's thank Donato for staying with us afterwards before he returns home. Thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, everybody.
We appreciate you staying with us. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
It's funny. I had to ask because I wasn't told, but I knew this was the first concert of the season. So I asked Stephen. I said, "Oh, we doing this first one?" He said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you." No big deal, because I never use it anyway. I always turn around and conduct the audience.